This video is going to contain spoilers from the off, so I'm warning you now. Well, the season finale of From is finally here, and it's safe to say that this episode most definitely lived up to the title that it had, which was Revelations Part 2. We got the long-awaited answer to the meaning behind the numbers on the bottle tree, and confirmation that the reincarnation theory is something which is occurring within the town. For all of those that thought Tabitha was Eloise, as per the ending of this episode, she was in fact Miranda. With an ending that showed us that Julie is also going to be getting more familiar with her time-traveling abilities and looking to influence the stories of the past, even though it's not a possibility. The show has just opened up a can of worms where the timeline of Fromsville will be getting explored. So with that, let's jump into the video and break down all that there was to take away from the season finale, including that epic death. Here is From Season 3, Episode 10, Ending Explained. Jim's death explained. Okay, so this is most definitely where I feel we should start. After Jim getting a sense of redemption with Tabitha in the previous episode, and him making amends with Ethan as well, his journey has now come to an end. During the closing moments, after Tabitha said that she needed some time to herself after realizing that she was once Miranda and Jade was once Christopher in a past life, Jim walked off to the ruins of the RV that he was in when himself and his family got stuck there. During this scene, we saw Julie appear after calling for her dad, and she looked slightly different compared to the last time that we saw her in the diner. This was because this was a Julie that was from the future and had gone back in time. A couple of episodes back, we found out that Julie had the ability to be able to go through time and witness events unfolding, events that had already taken place within the town, and Ethan referred to her as a story walker. Despite her having this ability, no matter how hard she tried, the events of the story and time period that she was visiting weren't able to be changed. This is because a story walker can only witness events that have previously unfolded, not alter them. Julie calling for her dad and telling him that he had to get out of there because this was where it happened. It showed that she was trying to change the outcome of the events of his death. But with Jim ultimately dying, it showed that it couldn't be changed. The utter fear, upset, yet joy that Julie had on her face in seeing her father for most probably the first time in years was a moment that was heartbreaking to see. And then when she witnessed her father dying all over again, it was another layer of heartbreak. The man in the yellow jacket was also a character that was shown to us in this scene, and he seemed like he had some importance behind him. He was extremely creepy in his pale appearance and dark eyes. He said the line, "This didn't have to happen, you know. Knowledge comes with a cost." This was before he killed Jim, and it almost tied back to the phrase that Sarah said when she mentioned that the town didn't give, it just took. In this instance, there was a price to the information that Tabitha and Jade received, and it was the life of Jim. The man also said, "I did try to warn you." This makes me think that he could have been the creature that was behind the voice of Thomas when he was previously reaching out to Jim. What was interesting about this as well was the fact that it wasn't during the night. The man in yellow was able to walk around freely during the day, which adds an even greater threat to the people of the town moving forward in the new season. With Julie's scream being the final thing that we heard as the episode faded to black, yet it echoed over it, it was an incredible way for the show to finish, really allowing it to have that shock factor and that sense of abruptness that I didn't really know it needed. With Julie mentioning in the diner about going back in time and trying to save Tianchen and Thomas, and her clearly looking to do it for her father, I'm wondering if this is something that is eventually going to happen and she's going to be able to do it. I kind of hope it is, because I don't want that to be the end for Jim. The rebirth of Smiley. Another large revelation that we had in this episode was that the baby that Fatima was carrying was the Smiley creature. The kimono lady took the baby that Fatima gave birth to, and it was wrapped in some kind of shell that was made of skin. Once the creature was taken into the level deeper than the cellar, the Smiley creature emerged in front of all of the other creatures as they watched on. This was able to happen because of a revelation that Fatima found out. She found out that the creatures existed because they were promised eternal life if they sacrificed their children. So that's why Smiley was able to be reborn, because technically he cannot die and will just be born again if he does. I kinda like that explanation. Only people that were evil would sacrifice their own children for such a selfish reason. So it ties into the villainous mindset that the creatures have. The look on Smiley's face was one that was utterly haunting, and the fear that then became present on Boyd's face as he saw that he was back was one which showed that he was extremely fearful of what was on the horizon. The good news is we know that Season 4 was recently confirmed, so this story will be continuing in that season. Breaking Boyd. Did the town manage to break Boyd in this season of the show? Well, it got pretty close. He did some pretty horrific things to Elgin, such as smashing his hand to pieces with a hammer to find out the location of Fatima. But it was Sarah who went beyond because she didn't want Boyd's soul to be crushed and for the town to break him beyond repair. Boyd witnessed Father Katri in this episode, just like how he did in the opening episode of the season, and Katri made some fair points. He mentioned how Boyd was essentially a hypocrite for hiding Fatima away for committing a murder, yet he was keeping Elgin captive for doing something not even as bad as what Fatima did. This has always been Boyd's biggest issue. He's got the responsibility of the town on his shoulders, but he always does what's best for himself and his family over that of the town, even if it means jeopardizing the very town that he's supposed to protect, which probably means he shouldn't be sheriff. Boyd was given a photo of his house that he bought with his wife that he planned on retiring in before getting stuck in the town, and I feel that photo was shown to him because it was the town essentially saying that they were done with Elgin. It was a way of taunting Boyd and getting him to become even angrier than what he was so that he'd do something he'd regret and the town would win. Sarah was the person that got the information of where Fatima was located out of Elgin, as she knew how far somebody needed to be pushed before they'd be willing to give up information. So she took his eye, something which was absolutely brutal to look at. I did probably feel a little bit bad for Elgin in this episode because he did what he did because he genuinely thought that there was a way out for the people. But the town just preyed on the person that it thought was the easiest to manipulate. I'm now wondering if Elgin is going to be dead or if he's going to survive this. The last we saw of him, he was sitting there in his own blood, but he did look alive, just about. So if he gets treatment from Christie, then he might well survive. Acosta stormed into the room where Elgin was being tortured whilst Boyd was carrying it out, and she disagreed with his approach. I think next season we could see Boyd actually lose the power and position that he has. Boyd has proven to be a controversial figure amongst the townspeople in this season of the show, and I feel that's only going to continue into the next season. Tabitha and Jade. Who'd have thought that it would have been Jim that would have solved the meaning behind the numbers in the bottle tree? Jim recognized that there were 12 numbers, and those numbers reflected notes on the musical scale. The phrase, "music is the universal language," was something which made complete sense once he said it. This led Jade, Tabitha, and Jim to go to the bottle tree and play the music that was now appearing inside of Jade's head. It was quite a haunting, somber, and sad piece, and it was played over the top of Boyd walking through the tunnel and witnessing the rebirth of Smiley, and it suited it perfectly. It captured the tone of the scene and the fact that it was going to continue to be bleak. With the children walking towards Jade and Tabitha, they said the word Unkui, and Tabitha and Jade both realized that the word meant remember. This then tied back to her remembering when she was here but in a different life, her life as Miranda, and she saw that Jade was once Christopher, meaning that the reincarnation theory was true. Another large revelation was the fact that Miranda and Christopher actually had a child together. Tabitha and Jade had been there since the very beginning, and the reason they could both see the children was because they tried to save them before, but they failed. Plus, Christopher and Miranda had a child together, and one of the children that they needed to save was theirs, but she died. I wonder if the girl that appears the most to Tabitha is in fact her daughter. The fact that Tabitha said that herself and Jade had been there since the beginning, it makes me question if she was actually different carnations before Miranda. Jade saw somebody from the Civil War, so was that person once him as well? Because if so, it could date back extremely far, and it means that there could be more memories that are going to be uncovered and explored. There was a piece of dialogue that Jade mentioned at the start of the episode where he said energy can only change from one form to another, and he alluded to the likes of a soul lingering. I think that could be exactly what's happening here. The people that are reincarnations of others that were once there stay there because it lingers within the town, hence why they always end up back there because it's their destiny. It begs the question on how many of the residents have actually been there before in previous lives, or if others are just stuck there through association like Jim was due to Tabitha. Victor and Henry. Victor and Henry's story in this episode was all about Victor taking the blame off of his shoulders over the death of his mother and sister. He felt as though it was his fault because he told his mother about the importance of the tree. Henry didn't feel as though it was his fault though and told him not to blame himself. We saw the sight of the grave of Miranda in this episode, and Victor also had one for Eloise. But what was interesting with Eloise's grave is that Victor said that she was in pieces and he only thought that it was her. I definitely think that Eloise is alive. I can't see how she's not gonna be, especially after this now confirming that Victor didn't even know if it was his sister that he buried. I'm wondering if she could have actually made it out of the town, and I'm genuinely starting to believe that. My review of the finale. This was probably the best episode that the show has released in a long while. There wasn't that much action in it, but I didn't mind because the stakes were high in every corner, and I suppose that's what you get when the show is more of a slow burner. For example, we had everything going on with Elgin, Fatima giving birth, Jade and Tabitha finding out how to unlock the bottle tree, and Julie's time traveling. There was so much going on and we were getting answers left, right and center, so it just felt like a really rewarding episode. I was a bit concerned at the beginning because it did feel really choppy. The way Boyd was just moving around the town between cuts, and also the same was happening for Jim. So I'm glad that didn't end up lasting throughout the entirety of it. The scene where Smiley was born was utterly horrifying. Seeing him breaking out of that fleshy coating and emerging with the ear-to-ear grin was petrifying to look at, and you could see by Boyd's reaction that things were about to get worse for the town. Knowing that these creatures can't die as well is now going to make things even more difficult for the people. The sense of entrapment is going to be even greater. One thing that I feel got forgotten about a bit in the finale was the creatures in the forest that we heard when Kenny and Jim stayed that one night. Maybe this season was just about planting the seed for them, and then in the next season it'll be explored a little bit more and we'll be introduced to them. Julie's importance is something that I'm really looking forward to seeing develop as the show moves on. The story-walking ability and looking to change the past is something that's going to come with its difficulties, especially with the fact that her father is now dead. So the direction that the character is going to take is going to be a really fun one that we'll see in the show. The reveal of the musical notes in the bottle tree was handled well, although it was a bit abrupt. It kind of just summed up the whole, well, if you just told others in the town about your problems, you'd find a resolution quicker thing that the show suffers with. However, the reincarnation theory did stand to be true, and like the story walking, it's going to make the plot a whole lot more interesting. Jim's death was one that was pretty good and epic to see. It felt fitting that he died trying to protect his daughter and in front of the very vehicle that led him to the town. In terms of an overall season, I do think that it had its ups and downs for sure. It started strong, it got quite weak in the middle, and then it saved itself at the end. A lot of that just came down to the fact that there were underlying issues with the pacing and the fear of progressing the plot forward from the showrunners. Answers weren't arising and we were being made to guess every week, but what I would say is that the finale was rewarding because we'd almost been guessing for so long about what everything could be, so it's a double-edged sword. As I mentioned earlier, the good news is that Season 4 is definitely on the horizon. However, we have to wait until around 2026 for it to be released. But it gives us plenty of time to theorize about what could occur when it does. It's been a good show for sure, and it's made Sundays a whole lot more entertaining. It's nice for a show to actually be 10 episodes as well, rather than 6 or 8 like most shows do these days. We got some answers, so now we wait. So, there you have it, from Season 3, Episode 10, Ending Explained. If you want to see the entirety of From Season 3 being broken down, then click on the card in the top corner. There's an entire playlist there. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.